Does the Treasury have a future? Is the Treasury going to survive in modern conditions? Are we going to meet in a similar audience in about 5 years on the Moscow Financial Forum? This is what we're going to discuss today. My name is Roman Artyukhin. I am head of the Federal Treasury of Russian Federation. This week, there was published a study by Russian Presidential Academy saying that 20 million people by 2030 might lose their jobs. They will have to change their job. Also, in this forum, we have heard that maybe an accountant will cease to exist, a lawyer will cease to exist, the jobs will cease to exist. Why? Because of digitalization, because automatization. Indeed, it might happen so that our traditional function of distributional funds between budget system sanctioning and budget accounting might be executed by algorithms. And of course, this is a serious challenge to our job, to the Treasury job. The second challenge, dear colleagues, dear friends, that we're experiencing is from the side of the corporate sector. Unfortunately, we have heard it as well. For some reason, there's such an opinion that state governance, the quality of state governance, is losing compared to corporate governance. We are lagging behind. And in a number of countries, indeed, we have some examples where Treasury function is lacking. It's not there. It's executed not by the state body, but by banking organizations. For instance, in Australia, in the US, in the UK, the Treasury does not exist. All the accounts, all the sanctioned operations and transactions are done by credit organizations. Similar example compared in accountancy. In Australia, there is a report on the budget is executed by a private auditor's company, not by the state. You hire this company, and it's done perfectly well, and all the financial reporting is done by this company. And there's another challenge that's also quite serious. It's an internal challenge. Bureaucratization, regulation. A small example. I have two of our decrees. One of the first decrees that was adopted in 1999 when Tatiana Gennadievna was one of the leaders. It's very reasonable, it's very brief, 31-page, 2 or 3 templates. In 2008, we have reached perfection, it seems to me, about 600 pages, very detailed description of every single line. I also wanted to make an example, one of the recent examples, what surprised me a lot. Let's open archives. We're getting ready to the 75th anniversary of the victory, and we are recovering these bright pages of financial history. For instance, I have a report for Mr. Stalin from head of finance, Mr. Zverev. And here we also have a signature of Mr. Stalin. Mr. Zverev's thoughts must be taken into account in the 5-year plan, Mr. Stalin writes here. So this report covers all budget policy, all the fiscal policy in the wartime, and here it proposes different offerings for the next 5 years. And here we have our clarification about budget execution. In terms of weight, it's heavier, but in terms of content, we have a clear understanding that actually this one, the one that is more thin, is more is explaining more. It's a paradox now. We all believe that we should add more lines on the computers, we should add more regulation on the computer, and there's no surprise that year on year our regulatory decrees have becoming more and more thick year on year. State service is being reduced, and every state official might experience it. So how should Treasury survive? How can they survive? Yesterday, Mr. Medvedev said, when were the times simple? Was it simple for the first Treasury person in Russia, Mr. Svernov? Was it simple for Tatiana Stirenko from 1998? She was there when 1998 crisis happened. It has always been tough. And I'm sure that we can find answers to the challenges in the experience of Treasury. Let's start from 2008. 2008 is the year of global financial crisis. Treasury was ready to this crisis. Right before all the events, Tatiana Gennadievna, Mr. Sadigov, and myself went to the Ministry of Finance to come up with new tools to manage liquidity, to place budget funds on deposits. Why did we propose it? Why did we come up with it? Because there was this budget tool. Because a lot of funds get accumulated, and at the end of the year, it goes to the expenses of budget. 20% of the budget costs fall on December anyway. So our offer was as follows: let us adjust budget code. Let's introduce a tool that will help manage this temporary surplus. The first response that we had: are you crazy? How can budget funds be given to banks? How can you place them on deposits? They might not return them. Of course, there are risks, yes, but you should manage those risks. And in 2007, amendments were introduced to the budget code. Gradually, slowly but surely, the mechanism started getting deployed. And in 2008, these tools, out of the blue, worked perfectly well. When overnight the financial system got an inflow of 880 billion rubles as a surplus, and it solved out the problems of arrears and non-payments. And there's another story that flows from this story. You should also raise some funds. Mrs. Lopina, my deputy, she was my deputy back then. I have just stepped into this capacity back then. We were hammering out mechanisms. We were thinking what should be improved. And on one night, she came over and said, there's a great offering from different pockets that we have. We had some customs accounts back then, if you remember, 414, and extra budgetary funds. Let's consolidate all this liquidity on one treasury account. First response from me was, it's illegal. Come on, how can we do it? These are different surpluses. How can they all be on one account? But my deputy was a wise person. She said, just sleep on it. Don't rush. Don't jump to conclusions. And in the morning when I woke up, I thought, exactly where one corporation. It's a brilliant idea. It all belongs to the state. Yes, it is in different pockets, but if we compare ourselves to the corporate sector, it can be consolidated to one treasury account, and it can bring one big result. And we already have some effects from that now. Great impacts. In all these years, incomes of the federal budget, we have received 645 million rubles. This year we have contracted 165 billion rubles, and these are three big budgets of a good constituent, annual budgets of a constituent. Developed tools, new tools, deposits upon requests, repo deals, reverse repo, overnight, swap deals. I'm naming these words. I know that there are two people in our treasury who know about them very well. Mr. Prokofiev and Mr. Drozdov. By the way, Mr. Drozdov had his birthday on the 4th of September, so let's congratulate him. Let me make a note. We developed all these tools ourselves. We did not hire anyone. We studied it all. We looked into it, and even Moscow Stock Exchange recognizes it. We created new segments of financial market. The second project that we have, in the beginning we thought it was a paradox. We thought it wouldn't work. So what was the problem there? The problem was that we are executing the budget, we have the cash operations, and 99% every year. However, the balance is growing. New assets are coming in, and it's increasing up to 4 trillion rubles, and it's accounts receivable. It's like the second budget. And the reasons sometimes were that the logic of financial management and financial managers of our corporations is as follows. However, we cannot blame them on it. So their logic is, if the penalty is smaller than the income in currency operations, in deposit operations, then their logic tells them that maybe they can execute their obligations a little bit later, and they are fine in paying the penalty. And more and more of our advances, more and more advance payments, and more subsidies from the federal budget was on the leftovers, on these 4 trillion rubles. They were on accounts receivable, and they should have been a result, and they should have turned into tangible results. So there was a proposal. If I proposed it 7 or 8 years ago, I would say that it was crap, and I wouldn't believe in it, and I would be right probably. So what was the proposal? Let us stimulate faster execution of this money spending. Let's open legal entities. In 1990s, it would not be the right time to do it. In the year 2000, it would sound exotic, but in 2010, it was timely. And indeed, in this time, what we have seen, for the first time, accounts chamber of the Russian Federation has seen that the growth of accounts receivable reduced. We started using the money started flowing into the economy much faster. And there is no chance to get these resources away from the result and from the purposes that they're designed for. Unfortunately, I have to say, we are happy about these big payments, but well, it's not our purpose to get more and more of them. Our purpose is to make sure that the break-even, like the extra money, is zero. As soon as we receive the money for some projects and some targets, we want this money to go and work right away. The Treasury is servicing 29,000 legal entities. They are not budgetary enterprises. They're not state-owned. And what's left is about 500 billion rubles. This is the result, yes, but it's not the result that makes us happy. Maybe it's even a pleasure for us as people from Treasury, but people from finance as well. And we know that we should push money further into the economy so that every ruble from the budget works for the purpose and for the result that they're designed for. The next project that I wanted to talk about refers to the single information system in procurement. I got acquainted with Anna Timurazovna in 2008, approximately about 10 years ago, maybe even earlier. Back then, in a meeting in the Ministry of Economic Development, Anna Timurazovna, maybe it was in the times when Mr. Grev was the Minister of Economic Development. So back then, she offered to design a single information system for procurement. So what was the description? Let's remember the situation that was back then. Scattered procurement, every region, every district, every constituent was making procurement separately. And in some way, procurement was done, but there was no one single space, no single platform, and there was no such competition as well. And Anna Timurazovna offered, let's invite all the people who want to procure into one space, into one platform. My first response was, it's Russia, we can't do it, it's not going to work. But Anna Timurazovna and Minister of Finance, the Minister of Economic Development, everybody got engaged into the project. We all believed in this, we started living it, and Mr. Nesterenko also, and Mrs. Nesterenko also believed in this, and we rolled our sleeves and got into this project. We started getting the job done. And what's the result that we have now? I would like to show a small video for you. Please play the video. Single information space for procurement, single platform. Statistics, 2.4 million users, 400,000 customers, 540,000 suppliers, 220 million requests daily, 5 million contracts daily. The volume of procurement exceeding 25 million. What is this single system? Private offices for a supplier, for a controller, and for a bank. The online accounts, private online accounts. Procurement, planning, regulation, the catalog of goods, and financial control. Contests, auctions, procurement, special procurement for special organizations, online questionnaires and forms, procurement for refurbishment and reconstruction of buildings, mobile application. You can manage it online. You can also manage incidents online. Registers, different registers, procurements, reporting, technological components, mobile application. You can manage incidents online. It's one big ecosystem for procurement. Challenges in 2019. Lengthy procurement procedure. We should optimize the procedure. A risk of non-availability of different procurements of different products. Submitting the application through a different source. Non-transparency. Prices from aggregators and different stock exchange and auctions. Contracts executed in paper. Payment online. Paper procedures, red tape. Considering complaints online. What are we to do next? Follow the news, follow us on zakupki.gov.ru. Brilliant example of using modern digital technologies in favor of the state, in favor of the people. Next project that we started implementing unexpectedly, 2016, decree of the President to pass authority on state financial control to the Treasury. Question 1, why Treasury? Moreover, there are often questions like, isn't there a conflict of interest here? Treasury sanctions transactions, makes payments, and gets a function to supervise and to control budgetary enterprises and budget funds. Isn't it happening so that the Treasury will cover for itself? Like the Treasury does a mistake somewhere, and then during control and release, we're just covering for ourselves and not disclosing it. What does the practice show? Throughout all years, only 3 years actually, we have found a new tool, a new approach to do revisions and checks and inspections. Let me talk about one situation which happened before we accepted this power, this authority. One of the diseases was a failure to co-finance the expenses.
So we did a lot of inventories, and we realized that the constituencies of the Russian Federation cannot make those proportions, 80 to 20 or 30 by 70. So there has always been a gap that prevented us from reaching good results because, of course, we had to get the money. So now we have an opportunity to integrate all sorts of tools and instruments that the Treasury uses. And thus, we can streamline the processes to change this situation, to improve it. And we did it last year. We used the mechanisms, special mechanisms that could give money for the needs. And thus, we could follow the proportions I mentioned. So this was a very good lesson for us, because it shows the principle that we have to use. We have to use the whole range of tools in order to resolve a problem, not for the sake of punishment, not to identify the problem and then get an extra income, because we actually made to raise 69 billion to the budget. The majority of this amount was given by the legal entities. We can be proud of this amount of money that was returned to the budget. But the main thing that we have to prevent the violations, to help our regions, our recipients, so that they could avoid the violations. And this is what we're doing. We're building it up. We create risk maps so that each institution could be aware of this risk and could develop the tools together to prevent negative implications. So how does the Treasury of the Russian Federation cope with all these functions? We have been reduced by 20%. By the way, when I became the leader of the Treasury, we had 14,000 people more. So we had a lot of people made redundant. And we are facing another wave of the similar process. We are going to reduce the number of personnel by 15%. So how could we survive in such conditions? We have to strive for maximum efficiency. We set up a special center and we became a unique state authority, because we don't have our accountants, we don't have our procurement officers. All these functions and authorities are implemented by other departments. How did we do it? So we try to redistribute the numbers and the functions. So we redistributed the responsibility, and now the staff members of this center can do procurement, do accounting, identify salaries, etc. That's why we reduced the number of accountants by 4 times, of procurement officers by 2 times, and we had 900 staff members. That was reduced by 60%. So these are the examples of efficiency measures. And this is what we are going to do in the future in our work. So this is an example that helps us understand how to meet the challenge. How can we improve the public management and whether the public administration can compete with the business corporations. Actually, my deputy, Dmitry Grishin, who is a treasurer, you know, he started this earlier on, and he left the treasury, and he became the head of the treasury of Gazprom. So he went to work in a corporation. So dreams come true, and it's great that treasurers also make their dreams come true. So we have a response to this challenge, the centralization of functions based on the treasury. So what kind of functions can we provide with reducing numbers? What can we give to our native budgetary network? Centralization of accounts. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult to implement on the municipality level and constituency of the Russian Federation. Just imagine what it means if you have to do all these treasury functions instead of a different party. And we have been handling this task successfully, despite of a lot of paperwork. And Tatiana, I can assure you we will cope with this issue. That's a big challenge for the Treasury. Now let's take a look at another video. No, it's the wrong one. We have seen it already. The next one, please. Thank you. So this is the project that started in 2019, and it helped to create over 1.7 million of electronic documents, provide salaries over 17 billion rubles, create a unified database over 33 million megabytes, and make 35 operations per second. So this was the result of digital transformation. This is one of the key areas for the development of public administration. On the federal level, the accountant services operate in each territorial area, and Ministry of Finance is an architect because it's develops the methodology for centralized accounting on the federal level, and then federal treasury becomes the main methodologist that provides methodologies for accounting for all public authorities. In 2018, the federal treasury started to implement this project. At the moment, now we have 13 federal executive authorities have delegated their authorities with regard to accounting and remuneration. Thus, we have over 6,000 users just in the period of 8 months, and they make calculations of the remuneration for 76,000 of employees. Thus, we create single business process using one common cloud that brings together hundreds of databases. We also set up a single contact center that provides support to the users, and this helps us to store this information reliably. Duplication of data has been excluded. Beginning with 2020, 21 federal executive authorities will delegate this accounting functions to the federal treasury. So the centralized model of accounting in public administration based on the principles of digital transformation will help improve the quality of financial management and give an opportunity to optimize the course of the federal budget. Dear friends, I suggest that we vote now in order to continue our discussion. I hope you all have the application of the Moscow Financial Forum. If you don't have it yet, please get it downloaded. So you should open this application. We're using modern technologies, then the survey, and you should enter this code 4277. And then let's start voting. So the question is, can the functions of Russia's treasury be outsourced? I know my colleagues are here, so their answer will be obvious, but I encourage you to be very honest about this. So we are having the voting. The first answer is no. Then the second, actually, it's possible. And the third, yes, we can outsource it, and all these functions can be implemented by the commercial sector. I guess we have around 150 people here in this room. So we are having voting on the way. Everybody is busy with it, as far as I can see. So despite that most of people in this audience represent the Treasury, and they are my colleagues, 16% of people believe that the functions can be outsourced. But would it be effective? Let's discuss it. So that's what we're going to do. And actually, I voted for the third option. Yes, it can be outsourced. Why not? Let's just think about it. How long could it last? Are there any external changes that might affect these functions? And we are having some more people here from KPMG company, and they wanted to take part in this meeting. So could you make a report instead of us? Hello, good morning, dear colleagues. Anatoly Kovalenko, KPMG Director of Digital Practices. We are dealing closely with the practices that Roman mentioned earlier on. We provide accounting functions, and we basically play the function of outsourcer. Of course, we can speak about negative consequences of outsourcing, but also there are many positive effects of outsourcing. Mostly we mean accounting when we speak about outsourcing. And over 25% of accounting functions have been already delegated to outsourced companies in the West. So there are certain advantages of this. Because an external company can do this easily. First of all, it is related to the changing of the process. When you delegate this responsibility to your inner subdivision, still it's part of your company or corporation, and it affects the public institution, the group of companies. It makes them change their business processes and transform them. Usually, when accounting is handed over to the internal subdivision of servicing, sometimes it can last longer, and it's not that easy. An outsourced company is a service company. They provide accounting for the current processes, and they can do it much faster without any resistance. That's the one thing. Then another thing is this. When people centralize functions, of course, problems won't disappear overnight. We have to hire people, motivate them, retain them, train them, and that's not that easy. Are they expensive? Are these services expensive? Well, the cost is comparable. If we speak about CapEx, you know, when you set up an internal department, it would involve a lot of capital expenditures. When you outsource these functions, you won't need any capital expenses. So these are the major advantages. If we speak about the functions that can be outsourced by the Federal Treasury, they would include supporting, control, and operating IT system. This is the most frequently function that is outsourced in the West, because they can do it pretty fast. It's true, we have touched upon the issue related to liquidity management, and there was a big jump made by the Treasury, because they have covered a lot of financial instruments. But the bank sector has more expertise, more knowledge and experience with regard to market analysis and the risks that can affect the market situation. So they use a wider range of financial tools. So overall, I just can't say that, you know, there's only way for outsourcing and nothing else. There must be a healthy balance between these two. But anyway, I'm sure that there are lots of positive features about outsourcing, so I'm looking for your verdict. It's true, dear colleagues, it's a big challenge, and we are discussing it. So it's not something artificial, it is there. And many times we hear that, oh, you are not very effective because you spend a lot of resources for your work processes, and lots of these functions can be delegated to business sector. So, Anton, you are the leader of our project for centralization of accounting. What do you think? Good morning. I chose option B. Yes, they can be redistributed between different bodies. Yes, it's possible, but how easy would it be to complete all this job? Sometimes the commercial sector can have a lot of illusions. Yes, you'll provide all the documents, we'll make all the accounting notes, provide all the reporting in the service company, but that's all an illusion, because the reality will be different. We'll outsource this, but then the company will find lots of conflicting processes, and the outsourcing company will have to invest a lot of money so that they could develop the right thing for each body. And it will require a lot of competences, so it won't be beneficial in economic terms. So we speak about corporations. We take Treasury as a corporation, so it can change the process because it can have an impact on these processes. So why do I think that outsourcing won't compete well? Because we have to unify the processes via automation and unification. Thus, we can reduce the scope of resources. We'll become more competitive as compared to an external company that can do it. And all the outsourcing will stop once you have to process the information from 14 different accounts. But this was a joke, and my colleagues from the Treasury understand it very well. This question is very interesting, and I wanted to add something. There are certain functions of the Treasury that have been already delegated because they are all digital now. So we have to create technologies and business processes so that the machine could perform these functions. If you remember well, the distribution of income by the levels of the budget, the distribution of subsidies, the operations related to accounts. So all these functions are now completed and performed by machine. And this changes the quality of Treasury and the profile of its work. I hope that we'll have another discussion about it, because this is inevitable. We won't survive without this in modern world. Now, as to the outsourcing these functions over to the commercial company, I think I actually voted for this option. Yes, I think it's possible if the Treasury cannot show the best standards. So, sometimes it's difficult to understand the situation. You have to compare yourself with others. If you say no, it means that everything is just fine, we don't have to do anything. Maybe it can. That's why we have to improve continuously. But 25%, as you can see, voted for option 3. Now, let me ask my second question, and we can continue our discussion. So let's put it on the screen. So, can the Treasury cope with today's risks and challenges faced by the system of public administration? And there are 3 options. The code that you should enter 1415. So let's compare ourselves with a certain imaginary Treasury. And I wanted to share you a story. When I became the leader of the Treasury, I had a meeting with German Gref in Sberbank, and he actually said, "Why don't you delegate the function over to me? Let me deal with all the accounts, and it'll be twice as cheaper." This is what German said.
So 3 options, 3 answers. Let's vote. Let's do it. Last time we had 126 people voted, and the majority says yes, the Treasury is fine for current challenges, but we should not stop here. We should keep on moving on, keep on developing it. Dmitry Sergeyevich, you were the one who put your hand up. You have a unique experience. We've looked into, you know how state treasury works. You have a great idea about it. Now you are heading treasury of the largest Russian corporation, a private corporation. What would you recommend to us? Thank you, Roman Yevgenievich, for the opportunity to speak. I put my hand up answering the previous question. Let me answer both, this one and the previous one. It's important to understand, and it's important to see the difference between the federal treasury and corporate treasury. And there is a number of differences. Federal treasury, of course, is not the treasury that we used to have in older times. As you have fairly mentioned, Treasury is different now. It has centralized procurement, centralized accountancy. And thanks to these, thanks to automation, thanks to modern technologies, there is such a great effect, there's such a great impact on modern Treasury. If we outsourced it, I don't think we would have achieved the same, because it was a centralized task together with the Ministry of Finance. It was a centralized will. It was a team that's gaining more and more experts, and it's moving forward. And this team had the power to push the boundaries, to push the walls, to push the ceiling, to push everything. It wouldn't have been possible without it. And I remember when me and you together were going to the Ministry of Economic Development from the Treasury, and they kicked us out, they criticized us, and they told us, oh, you want to replace the banking system with yourself? You want to ruin the banking system? We have commercial organizations, we have the market, we have everything, everything's fine. Interesting. Corporate sector does have competitors as well. The state sector is a competitor of the corporate sector. Yes, of course, goes without saying. So I think this synergy fact, when we respond to it, when something doesn't work, then we're going to the Minister of Finance. Tatiana Gennadievna, please help. We need to make this and these amendments. Tatiana Gennadievna first says, no. First, you should prove. First, justify it. But then Tatiana Gennadievna buys into the idea, and then she supports us. And this is also what corporate treasury cannot do. So Federal Treasury has a synergy. We can manage changes on the level of methodologists, and we can introduce adjustments to legislation. What is Treasury now? You can delegate the function. Federal Treasury is a will, is people, is a team, is travel to move forward, and is an ongoing internal competition in a good sense, and a desire to come up with something new. And we keep on comparing ourselves with someone else, with Sberbank, for instance. And being a Federal Treasury, we have been proven, and we should keep on proving that we are better. We can do it better. And we don't feel like we have done it, we have achieved it, and now everything is fine. We keep on moving on, we keep on developing, we keep on striving to perfection. And with this team, with the current team, you cannot outsource it. You should not do it, because, just one more minute. People from the private market, they can do it cheaper, better, faster, but as soon as they have the function, they're telling you, oh, we are having losses, we cannot do this, we cannot do that, and let's increase the price. They will charge you higher. So Federal Treasury as a federal structure is efficient, is competitive, and is moving on really fast, rapidly. It's leaping forward. As to corporate treasury, it was established by Mr. Shuvalov in 2014. Not much time passed by. And what we have right now in corporate sector, sometimes we outsource corporate treasury function, and there are examples when first we are doing an outsource is centralized servicing, operating center for for servicing up to HR, any service. Sometimes we are taking the services not only of our corporation but of other corporations as well that are at an earlier stage of development. So for corporate treasury, it cannot be done. You can do it. You can outsource it. In conclusion, but all approaches are being harmonized in corporate sector both and in federal treasury. I want to say that federal treasury is very competitive. It is moving on with an exponential growth, and only when it stops, only when it says that we are fine now, we don't need to move on. This is the point when it goes down. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dmitry Sergeyevich. I would like to give the floor to Anna Tamurazovna and wanted to touch upon another subject we have not spoken about yet: bureaucratization. Our portal, the single portal for procurement, the customer used to have a chance to go to a nearby collective farm and to buy some foods there and to buy some stationery where they want. Now, in order to make a procurement, you should sign up, you should register, you should study law number 44, and suppliers also know this law now. Is there a paradox in here? Is it artificial or not? So we're bureaucratizing our industry more and more. It's a complicated question. I was ready to answer the previous one, but I wasn't ready to answer this one. So let me try to answer both questions. Procurement system is a part of system of state governance. And the level of bureaucratization, the level of red tape, and the level of bureaucratization in procurement, they are somewhere on par, on the same level. It's either we're inefficient overall or either we are efficient overall. And about law number 44, and there are 300 bylaws to this. 10 years ago, we didn't have this all. Now we are spending budget funds, and this is a state source, state-owned source. It's a big part of economy. Of course, we must make sure that all companies and all enterprises have equal access to this source. In order to do that, in order to ensure it, you need to automate the process, you need to come up with rules. Automation is needed to delegate some functions to machines. And the question is whether we implement it efficiently. We always have a lot of great ideas, but the problem is with execution. There are some problems with procurement, but I wanted to give an open answer. In the first question, I voted for the fact that we can outsource the function, but within state governance system. Let me answer why. What do we understand by this function? If we want to recruit a lot of IT people into Treasury, it's not Treasury. Function of an authority is methodology. It's creating rules. It's regulation. It's a mindset. It's maintaining the balance of these rules for all stakeholders. For market players, for monopolies, they're also market players, but they're special ones. For state bodies and state authorities, they represent the interest of people. Everything we do, we're doing for people. It's not to show up in front of each other. This is why we're balancing with the level of rules that we're creating. We're trying to create quality business processes, quality services, and we're trying to shape up what we should do in digital, and we're backing it up with some regulation. So I guess if we outsource it, then we would confuse it all. We would mix it all up. So if we switch from ideas and from generating these ideas to real maintaining the system and executing properly, we are competing only with other authorities. So they're the only competitors to us. And then the next question, the question actually is, does Treasury have competitors, and whether the Treasury can exist? We get functions. Why? Why? Because Roman Yevgenievich is a manager, or because we have resources to execute these tasks, or maybe because we're better than others. And here, I think we should compare ourselves with our colleagues. remembering the context that we're with, regardless of resources, meaning financial resources and specific people who are leading us, we should just put ourselves to a test. Like, if we take away one of the functions, are we going to be still the same efficient? And are we still going to be competitive to our peer authorities, to peer state authorities and state bodies, officials? And if we delegate the same functions to others, do we believe, are we sure that they're going to do the same well? It means that we should grow our competence, we should grow our methodology, we should take a deeper knowledge in details. A leader must understand that digitalization and regulation should be close to each other. You cannot split them. It shouldn't be like one person responsible for regulation, another person responsible for digital. It should be one person understanding it all. This is a big challenge for everyone now. Thank you. About bureaucracy, the red tape, is it bigger or smaller? Yes and no. The volume of bureaucracy related to regulation, to rules, has increased. But if we did not support it with different solutions such as digitalization, then it wouldn't have worked now. Now I think we have a balance. Greater number of rules and regulations, but it has been complemented with the number of digitalization. This answer, I also have it, but it should be seamless. All these rules, all these regulations, it must be seamless. They're for us. An algorithm or a manual, they're for us. We don't have to drag it all to the level of regulation for everybody. All that we're doing is it's done objectively for our treasury people or for customers, but whether we should escalate it to the upper level or not. Some business processes, they're flowing one into another, and we have it in our electronic budget. So it's like principles of electronic budget. My final comment to support just what you're saying. Indeed, regulation has increased dramatically now. I'm speaking about procurement. There are a lot of documents, a lot of regulation. We're reluctant to switch on our brain. We're reluctant to think in order to turn some rules into quality business processes. We would like somebody else to execute it. Like, we would like to just outsource it and somebody else turns our regulations into digital, for instance. But doing it ourselves based on our principles and rules and creating quality business processes, this is a challenge for us right now. And this is our purpose. I have this purpose in front of me. I'm setting this objective for me. Thank you. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, who wanted to speak? Vladimir Tigranovich, yes, please. Vladimir Tigranovich is a representative of the academic community of a university. If you allow, I would touch upon the previous speech related to how to guide it all. Could I ask you to please come over here, because there is more light here, we could see you here. Well, yes, indeed, we're speaking about rules, about methodology. This is what we should deal with on the federal level. We should develop these methodologies. But Treasury is not a corporation. Treasury is a state structure that works based on quite harsh conditions. There should be harsh rules. There should be strict rules, because we're speaking about budget funds, about state-owned funds. And here I wanted to refer to the experience that Roman Yevgenievich has gained being with Federal Treasury. First of all is creating an institution. When we're creating an institution, then the level of bureaucracy is going down. There is an institute that does not depend directly on Roman Yevgenievich. In this case, the institute works. Tomorrow another person comes over, but institutions will still be there, and they will be dealing, they will be handling the system. As to state procurement, when I was speaking about institutions, these are institutions in supervision. This is where all the processes and inspections and punishments and violations go particularly painfully. At least two institutions. First is the Council on External Quality Control. Let's working together with Roman Evgenievich. That's where we are taking part. And all the resolutions and all the methodologies are brought there, they're tested there, and then they go into life, they go to people. The second institution is a control commission. This is where we discuss disputed items before litigation. And we are sorting them out. We're trying to sort them out on the level of Federal Treasury. All the stakeholders are invited there, and all the stakeholders who are subject to disciplinary punishment. And all together, as a team of people, we are handling it. In the beginning, Roman Evgenievich was taking part in every single commission. Now the institution works even without him. We get together, we balance all the pros and cons, and we make decisions, we make resolutions. Now the most sensitive question, state procurement. State procurement is an enormous, giant machine. The new laws that became available recently is going to be much more complicated with some institutions, but we should refer to the experience of the turbulent 90s. In turbulent 90s, we didn't have special laws, but in state procurement were there. And if I remember it right, decree number 407 became available back then. It came to exist. We should look into those old documents. They were very well developed in terms of methodology. Everything was written there perfectly well. There were no laws, but the rules were there, according to Decree 407. All these rules were developed perfectly well. There were instructions there that allowed to handle many issues related to state procurement. It did happen, but it ceased to exist after we adopted one law, then another law. And then the methodology became like, it's not down to earth anymore. It's very far from reality. But in terms of supervision, where we work together, here institutions do work and they do their job perfectly well. A very important thing that you said, institutions matter. This is even one of the laws that is well known in the economy. We must create institutions, and we are one of these institutions. And inside us, within our umbrella, we have such institutions. So if possible, deputy manager of the control department of the president. The subject of this discussion sounds really great, but I wanted to continue what Vladimir Tigranovich has mentioned. He mentioned a very important thing in the beginning of his speech, that you are an authority. You're a branch of power, and this is what defines, in legal point of view, this is what defines what's going on. We know that every executive power has not only power, but also responsibilities. And within our discussion, none of us has mentioned the responsibilities. We were speaking about the functions, but functions, this is what authorities consist of, and this is a combination of rights and responsibilities and functions.
So we should consider the question, which sector can we delegate our functions to? And also it's important to understand what will happen afterwards. Are we not going to lose our power once we delegate our authorities? So that's why it's very important to understand which part can be delegated without violating the public contract and without breaking the fragile balance which is related to the management of public finances. You mentioned that you have extended your business processes because it now includes the function of supervision. So that's why it's very important to think in order to understand what can we hand over, what it is that we can delegate. So yes, that's all about improvement of our functional operations. That's a very important task, but very complicated at the same time. If we speak about the bureaucratization of the process, it's always good to get rid of some excessive activity. But again, it has to be done very carefully in order to maintain the right balance. Thank you. I guess our discussion wouldn't be complete if we didn't listen to the auditor from the accounts chamber, because you always welcome us. You are our external auditor and you evaluate our activities. You do the performance evaluation every year, and I guess Tatiana knows us best of all. I have to say that this happens not just once a year, but twice a year. Okay. So if we're going to treat it as optimization of business process, this is possible as an option. But anyway, we have focused on the history of evolution of the Treasury today during this discussion. But the second part that concerns the new opportunities has remained underestimated, and hasn't been discussed yet, because I think that the Treasury has a very good, big potential, and it should be used more effectively than it's used now. And it's related to human capital and many other valuable resources, including the federal budget funds allocated for digitization and providing other operations of the Treasury. So this is the foundation that helps us achieve good results. Now, what about new opportunities? Is there a real need? That's the one thing. And then the second thing is whether the public at large and the state wants to implement the business process better, so that we could set the bar. I guess we can say yes to both of these questions. Therefore, I just want to wish all the success and achievements to the Treasury. And I want to draw your attention to the fact of the financial control system development. I guess there'll be another session attended by the Ministry of Finance, and we will elaborate on this issue further. Anyway, this has to be more proactive, and the system has to be focused on management solutions, and it has to be painless for the objects of control. Thank you. Well, dear colleagues, we should probably now sum it all up, and I would like to ask Tatiana to share her considerations. Yeah, you asked the right question. Does the Treasury has the future? It's not so much of a conclusion, but it sounds more like a continuation of the plenary session discussion. You know, I can't say you're right and you're right and you're also right, but I'm afraid it's true. If you can say for certainty what the world will look like 5 years from now, I will be surprised, because, you know, we see very rapid changes. So we don't know what it will be like in 10 years. We don't know what kind of technologies we will have in 5 or 10 years. So this is the main challenge. We cannot get ready to the crisis that already happened in the past. We have to improve. We have to do our best. So you have to take into account all kind of issues that might happen. So you have to be excessively prepared. So when I answer this question, whether it could be possible, I meant the competitive environment that help us become better. If you say no, then you understand, oh, you know, this is the way it is, and that's good enough. And that's why it's important to create internal competition. What else do I want to say about the system of public administration, the way the Ministry of Finance sees it? Of course, this is what the president decides. Everybody probably has higher education in economics or law. Of course, the public authorities is the power, and of course it has to fulfill its responsibilities, but it's also it does procurement. An employer is a participant of procurement process, manages property, so it's part of civil turnover. And that's why we have to understand that, first of all, it's not about treasury. This is my personal view. The state should be equal to other parties of the civil turnover. So there should never be any violence here. You know, when I hear that some suppliers don't want to get involved with the state because there are always inspections, always punishment, but it's not about criminal law. This is part of civil relations. So we have to change a lot with this regard. Many of you know that the contract system of USA, the book written by Fedorovich, affected me a lot. So the state should be equal to other stakeholders. So it should be an equal participant. This is what impressed me. But of course, it also has the function of power. Now we are going to develop a list of all the responsibilities and authorities, what belongs to power and what doesn't. Of course, accounting is not part of power authority. Yes, we can make conclusions later on, but anyway, procurement, accounting, legal support, IT support, these are functions that just support our activity. It's not a part of power functions. So that's why it's important to understand, can we delegate those functions that don't belong to power functions? Can we improve them? Of course we can. We can improve them through specialization. After all, you know, accounting can be performed by a specialized company for the whole big corporation named the Russian Federation. You probably remember it was 1995, 1994 when we studied the system of treasury, how it developed over years. You know, we traveled to many countries. Yeah, it was 2004. Oh yeah, but it seemed it happened a long time ago. So, and I remember that Roman argued for a long time, you know, if we have the main book of the Russian Federation in the center of the system, and then all the other issues will be rotating around it, related to different financial flows and assets, movements, etc. So this is the way I see the treasury. And it was my big dream, and now I can see the stand. I'm the head of our project, aimed at centralized accounting based on the premises of federal treasury. We are moving forward. We are making good progress, but still there is a lot more work to do. Of course, it doesn't depend only on Treasury, but the Treasury, together with the Ministry of Finance, could probably become more aggressive, more proactive. What is centralization of accounts? So I think 38% of digital documents. That's what we have. And in other cases, we have to use paper. We still print it from the paper. So it's about technical centralization. We are totally transparent. Yeah, I understand. I don't mean that nothing has been done. We are speaking about new opportunities and new rules. So the new rules have to follow the digital economy rules, and it's about cloud technologies, digital cards, digital processes. We can't just, take this order about appointment and then enter it in the system. We should do it in the system from the beginning. It has to be done automatically. I'm speaking about new rules because we speak about digital economy, and it's very different from other forms of economy. Because there'll be primary data developed in the clouds, and then we'll be able to generate all sorts of information related to accounting and other things. So these are the new rules. Even there is the new registration office, which now has been turned electronic. So there's the book of civil state acts, and so they all exist in the cloud. Now we have to put all the historic data beginning with 1926. So when the data is already available in the cloud, what is it going to be like? Big data works in a certain way. For example, I'm going to report about the register of population. So those books include all sorts of changes in chronological order. For example, people when they were born, when they died, when they changed their last names, when they got married, etc. So whatever is recorded will be available. So it will be just one long note. And then there will be information related to tax payer number and all insurance number, etc. This will be the primary resource for all. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to copy one paper onto another, because we're speaking about new rules. So these are the new rules. And what we're doing is a big challenge for us. That's why once we distribute between power-related authorities and non-power-related authorities, we can analyze them from the specialization point of view, whether it's information or accounting or legal services. Then we'll understand how many people work in different sectors. So specialization and centralization through digital technologies can help us change the numbers of people that do this work. Think about taxes. Of course, we cost a lot of money to the state because they are operation functions and they are very expensive for our taxpayers. So this is our major task to improve the situation. Yes, we can outsource it, but then somebody will say, oh, the profitability level has changed. So we have to create this internal competition. We are very expensive. We have to become better. We have to optimize the process, and we have to create all sorts of opportunities for all people so that we could deal with problems effectively. Instead of thinking of how we can argue with the accounts chamber, they should develop strategy on different norms and regulations. These are what the ministers should work on, whereas the specialists could work in their areas. Thus, the Treasury can cope with the challenges of today, but we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. What we know is the Treasury should become better and better. It should improve its work continuously, and I'm sure that they will be able to hand over their functions that support the activities. And this is not new. For example, we visited Canada. There is a Ministry of Public Services. They do procurement, sell property. They are also responsible for accounting. So this is what they do. Just one department for all the other ministries and agencies of the state. So this is a big challenge, and this is what we should try to achieve as well. So that's what we should work on. Yes, thank you very much. Maybe I haven't said anything new. It's true. It's a great pleasure for me to work with you. You know, I heard you in 1998 when you headed the Treasury, and so you brought us all together, and I felt like crying. You know, it was in 1998 when Tatiana was a teacher for us. She inspired us to do a lot of beautiful things. They all seemed impossible. For example, he asked, why do you live? What's your duty? How should you work effectively on your workplace? So that you could be proud of the work you do. Whereas in the late 90s, everybody forgot about these beautiful ideas. But when Tatiana mentioned those things, you know, it inspired a spark inside me. And I'm very grateful to Tatiana, being her student, because she helped a lot to us. So, dear colleagues, I guess Tatiana was right when she outlined certain issues. I haven't mentioned all our projects. Actually, the Parliament approved the regulation about new Treasury payments, but we can't speak about everything at this forum. We did brilliant work on control of cost effectiveness. There were a couple of projects, and we could save 2 billion rubles for the budget because we began to take a closer look at the list of costs. When we provide subsidies, you know, the cost effectiveness should be at the zero level, and these are the projects that help the Treasury develop further. And thus, we spent 126 human hours, man hours, and so we see a lot of opportunities in the challenges. We turn the issues into goals, because once we identify them, we can achieve those goals.
And the question is there an alternative to current Treasury? The answer is obviously, luckily, positive. Of course there is. And it's a better Treasury, the Treasury that we're building together with you, with a big team of Ministry of Finance and Accounting Chamber and the other state officials. Let us build this better treasury together. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Tatiana Gennadievna. Thank you very much to everybody who shared this session with us.